Hi, everybody. Welcome to this event. My name is Janelle Spark, and I'm the Membership and Assessment Chair for the Cal Women's Network. We so appreciate you taking this noontime hour to listen to some fabulous guests as we talk through the subject of Sheroes in leadership, championing equity, inclusion, and diversity. I will let our esteemed guests introduce themselves.
I can start. I'm Amber Johnson, Assistant Vice Chancellor and Chief of Staff in the Division of Equity and Inclusion. And it is exciting to join you all today. And I'll popcorn it so we don't have to guess to ding Joe since you're already off mute.
Okay. Thank you, Amber. Good morning, or good afternoon, I should say. It's past noon. Good afternoon, everyone. It's really my pleasure to be here. I am Jo Currie. I currently work at Cal State Fullerton, and I'm the Director of Leadership Institute for Tomorrow. And I'm also affiliated with Berkeley. I'm part of the Executive Leadership Academy. And there's Che.
Good afternoon, everyone. Che Abram, she, her pronouns. I'm the Chief of Diversity, Equity, Inclusion, and Belonging with the School of Public Health here with UC Berkeley, and I am very honored and humbled to be here with you all today.
Thank you so much. So before we get started, some quick housekeeping for this chat. We will be posting some disclaimer language in within the chat. So if you have any questions about how to engage throughout this webinar, please feel free to refer to those. Additionally, if you have any questions that come up that you would like to have answered, but you don't necessarily want to come off of mute, please feel free to also put them in the chat, and we will have some time for those questions at the end. Additionally, you can also find information on each of our panelists' bios in the chat as well. Thank you so much to Jolie for assisting with that. And without further ado, let's get started. So each of you has had an incredible impact in advancing diversity, equity, and inclusion and belonging in higher education and beyond. What pivotal moments in your career shaped your approach to leadership in this space? And if we could get started with Che, I'd love to start with you.
That is a wonderful question. I think I have had two pivotal moments, one of which was a lot of the advocacy work I did in the kindergarten through 12th grade spectrum. I worked and did a lot of work in that area and worked with a lot of people who felt silenced or felt like they couldn't bring things up. And I would sit in these trainings and there would be this bubbling issue no one would talk about. So I learned in that moment I had to kind of be the person who talked about the elephant in the room. And oftentimes that meant me showing up vulnerably and authentically and starting with something in that moment that then opened the door for everyone else to share. And the second is just understanding that in this role, as much as I know I'm for everybody and I'm not biased towards any one group, I have to constantly be consistent in my work. So one time I was advocating for students for something, and then it felt like other groups felt like I was biased towards the students so I just learned that like showing up consistently for everyone when things come up is really, really critical through that moment.
Well, I can chime in. Well, first of all, let me thank you for this opportunity, allowing me to be here on the topic of my passion. I'm really humbled, truly. We're two experts on a panel whose title and professional roles intimidate me because you lead this work, this important work on a daily basis. So I am here to learn, first of all. As an Asian woman whose positionality is a Chinese immigrant since the late 1960s, so that kind of puts you where I came from, that I realized, my voice needs not to be asked as I was taught that way, but asserted as I was taught again later, from really feeling as an immigrant, being an outsider's voice all the time, because I'm an immigrant, I assume that role that is someone from outside, right? So I assume that outsider's voice as an immigrant, and had to having ownership of my own voice in leadership, this shift from being a follower behavior where I was to a leader's mindset, it was taught to me in a women leadership program and what it means to be a woman leader. So when I was able to speak and act as a leader, I realized the power is tenfold. That was a pivotal moment that I went from passive, soft-spoken immigrant Asian woman to understand my voice was not only necessary, but it was also has impact. So that was a moment of a pivot from silence to purpose that shaped my leadership until today. Even I continue to learn, and I value the opportunity to exert my voice as a woman any day. I have a place and space at a table with a chair. So that's my pivotal moment.
Thanks for that, Dingjo and Che. So I think when I graduated with my PhD, I was 25, and a lot of people assumed I had this like brilliant master plan for my life because I kind of just shifted through time and space quickly. And I tell people all the time, no, I'm just a really good listener. And I think that oftentimes leadership is relational and power is relational. People give it to you, you don't take it. And to be asked and called into those spaces means that people see something in you worth leading, right? And so my entry into this work, actually, I never really wanted to do DEI work necessarily. It's a part of everything I do. It's how I breathe, it's how I move, it's the water I swim in. But in true DEI fashion, right, in these sectors, a lot of times, if you are a person of color, you get tapped to do the thing, right? You're assumed competent and you're assumed an expert. And so I studied those things, but I was not doing them necessarily. But again, after I got full professor, I got called, someone asked me, would you be interested in doing this? And at first I said, absolutely not. I just got full professor. My life has gotten really soft and cushiony and sweet. I don't have nearly as many responsibilities as, a tenure track or someone trying to get to full. But they kept asking, they kept asking, they kept asking. And then the gentleman who I was to replace, he passed away, and he was a beloved person. And so for me, that meant, okay, it's your turn to step up. I had no idea what I was doing. I'd never led in that capacity. I was not a chair. I was not a dean. I was just a faculty member who got asked to go from faculty to vice president. So you can imagine this whiplash. But I think when you are called to do something, I don't think whatever you believe in, divine energy, God, Allah, whatever you believe in ancestors, maybe, when they ask you to do something, they don't ask you because they think you'll fail, right? They ask you because they think you'll succeed. So I'm happy I took the leap. It was terrifying. But the work has been really rewarding, and watching how we are able to influence folks to push people to be courageous and to do the right thing. That's really rewarding.
Really fabulous answers already. Thank you so much for sharing more about your experiences. On the topic of diversity, equity, inclusion, and belonging in higher education, institutions often face resistance when implementing race and equity initiatives. What challenges have you encountered in pushing these efforts forward, and how have you navigated them? Amber, I would love to start with you this time.
Sure. I think there's a lot of challenges. Some of them are simple and some of them are very, very deep and very big. One of the challenges is people feeling like they have to be fully prepared to do this work, as if that preparation will prevent them from making mistakes and getting canceled, right? Cancel and guilt culture work weirdly together. And what I tell people all the time is there is no such thing as being fully prepared. I've been doing this work for 2 decades and I learn new things every single day, right? I want to learn until I take my last breath. because our lives evolve faster than our language can keep up, faster than the research can keep up. So there's always things to learn. So just jump in. Jump in when you're ready, because there will always be work to do. I think the other big barrier is folks thinking that equity is a pie, and once someone takes a slice, somehow there's less left over for everyone else. Equity is not pie, y'all. It's infinite, right? Our resources to create equity are infinite, because a lot of it comes from how we move and how we process and how we do things. And so getting people to understand that when you create equity for certain groups, especially those that are most vulnerable, that impacts all the groups in good ways, right? It's not pie, right? We share these resources, we share these moments. And by creating communities who have their needs met, we see decreases in all kinds of other issues. So it's a win for everybody, right? So making sure people understand that this is good stuff, it's not pie, right? We're not stealing pieces.
Thank you for that. I'd love to next move to Che.
Thank you, Amber. I'm all snap. It's infinite. It's not a slice of the pie. I, from my perspective, I think a lot of this work, there's two components, right? I think one of the biggest challenges is hearing what is not being said. So it's actually listening to the silent voices and the quietest voices. It's watching, it's taking in the informal stories people are telling you. It's listening to their experiences of what's happening to them and being able to pull that together into something that you can then really work on at a bigger level and really work to resolve, right? It's this belief that like diversity is a compliance place. People still seem to operate in this diversity, equity, inclusion, race and equity is all this compliance thing with these punitive pieces added to it. And it's not, it's a cultural change. It is a cultural behavioral shift that starts with an individual and then transforms who is around you, whether that's work folks, family folks, friends folks, or community people, right? And it's the willingness to constantly grow. And folks like to, and when it gets hard, like right now, it's tough right now. And a lot of people are like, so I quit, I'm backing away. And that's one of the challenges, because this work is ever changing and it's constantly moving. Who we are as an individual person is constant, right? And so I can't just give up on me because it got hard one day. I have to kind of figure out how to navigate that and pull resources around me for it. And with that, it's the storytelling. I honestly don't think we do enough what I like to call asset-based storytelling, meaning I went through this hard thing and it was a beautiful part of my story and it made me who I am today, right? We went through this hard thing in our school and this is a part of our story, and look at who we are today. Look at the beauty it created, right? And so I think that's really, really, really critical and important to tell our stories as a whole, but also tell the stories of the individuals around us. Because people, again, like this piece with the pie, people like to see themselves as not a part of the pie or the crust of the pie or one ingredient in the pie. They don't realize they are the pie. And so you have to get them to tell their stories and encourage them. That goes into what Amber said about what I like to call this bravery and encouraging people to kind of speak up. And Dean Joe said the same thing, use their voice, this agency we all have, so that, you know, everybody realizes we're the pie. Like this thing keeps moving, growing, and blossoming because of us, and we are a part of it, not because I'm separate from it and it's just moving on its own, right? So we coexist together and not as separates. So that's just what I would share with this.
Thank you so much. And then next, Ding Joe, I'd love to hear what you have to say.
Thank you. I think I'm going to focus on the word resistance in your question. For every action, there is a reaction. So I say resistance should be expected. So if we understand the anatomy and the process of change, as Che was talking about it. So I think we need to understand resistance, to empathize resistance. And then you may disagree, is to embrace the resistance because you have been waiting for it. It's like, oh, that's a different attitude about it. So I feel lucky because I encounter resistance with DEIB early in my career. It wasn't called that. Back then, it was called, it wasn't called DEI. So I was just pushing for multiculturalism at the time. So resistance often, I think to understand it in another layer, if you take the mask of the resistance off, it masks fear, this fear of loss, fear of power, fear of comfort, fear of tradition. I encountered this by reframing DEIB as a collective growth, not a sacrifice. And I always said, you got this wrong. You got this formula wrong. I have math background. So I always say, this is not a subtraction, it's an addition. Okay, it's not taking away something, but we're adding. So when you look at it from a subtraction formula, then you resist, right? You say, oh, you're going to give me something. Yes. How do we reframe that? It's not being understood somehow. So when we meet pushback, I understand that they have not experienced the beauty of true diverse collective in a unity. So I anchored this discussion when people are in the mode of resistance with what we just heard. Stories of building bridges, transforming bystanders into allies. They've not experienced it. And unity is not uniformity. It's valuing diverse strength that lift the whole. Resistance often comes, like I said, in disguise as tradition or neutrality. There are different ways, excuse me, of masking that. So I meet it with moral clarity, persistent passion, compassion, and the strategy. We have to have strategy. If you expect it, then you already been waiting for what strategy. My strategy is rooted in unity, and you'll hear that more, not in division. So this is my allergy acting up. We were talking about that. When people experience that their share humanity in the community, hearts begin to open to embrace what's different, understand what feels like to being left out and what. So as hard as it is, especially now, as hard as this, I remind myself, I expected this and I need to embrace it and lean into it so I can understand it and work it through it, this resistance at the individual level, as well as at an organizational culture, and certainly at the national level as well.
Wonderful. I'm sure most everybody in this call can empathize with, and all of everything that you each have shared so far really resonates. I know it definitely does for me. So thank you so much for everything. Che, you've emphasized the importance of community engagement and intersectional approaches to equity. What advice do you have for institutions seeking to build authentic, reciprocal relationships with underrepresented communities?
The piece that I have found most important, and I must give this credit, there's a former student I worked with, I can't think of their name, but they said this and it was just like ding, light bulb moment. The most important piece when it comes to this from underrepresented communities is that when an issue is brought to you, no matter who you are in the world, a lot of things have happened before that issue gets to you. Meaning the communities have worked one-on-one through the system, through the structure, through all the people possible, most times, to bring it and have exhausted like every single option. Meaning like something could have been worked on for a year and 2 years or 3 years before it even gets to you. And now it's become this emergent issue and this emergent need, but they've been working on it for like years or months or time. There's been so much time expended. And oftentimes when things are brought to organizations or whichever, they'll see that final moment, what most of us call like the top of the mountain, that little piece, they'll focus on that little piece and be like, well, why is this just now coming up? And all of these things. And there's this reactive state when the group has been working to be very proactive. So it's like, and when they're telling you, and it sounds like the first time to you, you need to believe them that first time, because understand that they have gone through the structure. Most communities that are underrepresented have essentially been, I like to say, raised in an environment where you have to exhaust all your options before you're heard. You almost have to be at a crisis point before you're heard. So when it comes to you, understand that like the community has been trying to resolve it, address it, deal with it. And that, again, you recognizing that, acknowledging that is starting a moment of building trust and vulnerability and authenticity, creating some safety and some security for folks to trust that the system will actually work, or the organization will actually do things to make change, so that the environment becomes better, as Dean Joe said, for everyone. It is a collective growth for everyone. And so I have found that like when it comes to engagement with communities and engagement with intersectional approaches, that's that piece where I said earlier, you listen to what's not being said. And you respond to that because you recognize like essentially that's the root of the issue. It's not just about like what people look like when they're bringing you the issue. The root of the issue is this doesn't feel good to anybody. So if I wasn't here bringing it to you and someone else experienced it, it's not going to feel good to them either. And that's the thing we need to work on so that we all feel this environment is supporting and taking great care of us. And include them, and include us in a collaborative way of addressing that and moving through that process and things. There's a point where I can take over as a leadership or whatever it is, or an organization to run it, but it has to be a collaborative idea and process to get to that like action step or strategy or whichever at some other state. So that's my thought and ideas on those pieces. And just to reiterate, please put questions or things in the chat or Q&A if you have them for us later.
Yeah, thank you for that. And thank you for the reminder as well. Ding Joe, in kind of a similar vein, you have been instrumental in shaping leadership development in higher education. What are some key leadership traits that you believe are necessary for today's higher ed leaders to drive systematic change in DEIB?
Thank you for that question. As I said earlier, I am a product of leadership development program for women, started by Carolyn Desjardins, who was a pioneer in women leadership development. I didn't understand anything about leadership, let alone seeing myself as a leader. So gone through those programs, have been in the leadership program for decades, and developing them and running them. I feel strongly about curated programs that thoughtfully develop those who are just young sprouts. I coach presidents, and many times by the time they're at that level, it's hard to reshape a ingrained behavior. So I believe in cultivating young sprouts, emerging leaders as early as possible. So leadership, because leadership is so important, it matters so much. You know, who we are is how we lead. So because of what we do, impact generations and generations in our formal higher education system, right? I feel that the tangible programming of cultivating future should really be very, very intentional and very well designed, and not a transactional kind of programming. This is how you do budget, and this is how you increase your enrollment. Those are all transactional leadership. But what's important is, to me, character building is key. For example, how do we help people to build characters? What brand are we building for ourselves? So you could be in a formalized leadership program, or you can develop a leadership program for yourself and ask yourself that, right? What character am I building? What brand am I building for myself as a leader? The cultivation of me, that starts with the self, the cultivation of the self. And the name, as a Chinese, our name always means something. And that I've been cultivated since, my name has been uttered, like, your name is Ding Zhou, which means this, and you want to live up to that. So what is that name, our name, stand for, that bears a certain character? I think additionally, I definitely would put, in terms of, you say, what key characteristics, moral courage. I hope you all agree. We need people, we need leaders that have that moral courage on top of having radical empathy. Radical empathy is a whole different level of empathy. And most importantly, I would say a character in this day and age to have that global mindset. So courage to stand up for justice when it's not popular. Empathy to listen beyond headlines and propagandas and center those marginalized voices, that ability to bring the marginalized voices into the center. Always hearing, right? You're hearing, but what voices are you hearing? Are you hearing the silence? I think those are key characteristics. And I really believe that a global lens, developing this global lens to see DEIB not as a local compliance or national outlaw sin, but as a universal imperative, and not words. This is not just words that you can ban. Leaders need to be developed into courageous beings. I think we need leaders who can transform through all that, through it. So that's why I would say I'll stop there.
Thank you. Moving over to Amber, your work explores the intersection of healing justice and equity. Can you elaborate on how healing justice can be integrated into institutional equity efforts and why it is essential for meaningful progress?
Absolutely. Thank you, Janelle. So hurt people, full stop, right? There aren't abusers who are also not victims. And oftentimes, if we are given the opportunity to create something new, if we have not healed from the conditions that created what exists, we will carry those through to our solutions. I remember during the second year of COVID, Arundhati Roy came to my former institution, St. Louis University. She received an award, a literary award. And they asked me to be the person to have a facilitated conversation with her on stage. And one of the things she shared really stuck with me. She said, COVID, just like any other major crisis or traumatic event, is a portal. It forces us to pause and reset because everything becomes chaotic. As humans, we have to decide what we're going to bring through that portal. We are in another portal right now. What are we going to bring through on the other side of this? What will reign supreme at the end of all of this when the dust settles? And so also, much like COVID-19, we did not stop and pause and mourn and grieve our dead. We did not have space for folks to heal through the traumas associated with the global pandemic, to heal through how our country addressed it and created more polarization because of it, right? Because we politicized this pandemic. When you look at a lot of the things that came out of it, you see evidence of those issues. We see evidence now of people bypassing their own grief and mourning when loved ones die because that has become normal. And so for me, if we're going to talk about racism, sexism, Islamophobia, Chinophobia, if we're going to talk about these big systems, we have to talk about how we heal through it so that we don't perpetuate them. The future is female is one example. That is taking a system of power and just flipping it. It is not asking us to reimagine power. It's saying, let's just give the power to someone else. That's not going to work for me. I don't want the same power structure. I want something radically and wholly different and unique that supports our collective thriving, our collective self-determination, our collective ability to just breathe. When we talk about higher ed shifting, higher ed is a place of massive hazing. It doesn't just happen in our sororities and fraternities. It happens with our grad students, it happens with junior faculty, it happens with our staff. If we don't heal from that, we end up hurting the very people that we are training to carry the torch beyond us, right? Kai Matthews, who's is the executive director of Urban Ed. It's a nonprofit here in the Bay. Their goal is to make sure that every student has at least one Black male teacher before 8th grade. She said, this work is not a sprint, but it's also not a marathon. It's a relay. And when we pass that baton, if we have not healed through our own mess, we pass it with the baton. So we have to heal. If folks were healed through racism, we would not be duplicating racism right now, right? So many of these new orders that are coming out, while they're saying they're anti-discriminatory, they are absolutely rooted in racism. So if we don't heal from the systems that we are trying to dismantle and eventually replace, we will end up perpetuating the same problems. And healing justice, just as a definition, healing justice, the word justice is referencing the notion that healing has to come to the people. It has to be accessible, it has to be equitable, but it also has to be relevant. And so oftentimes when someone has a trauma, we say, okay, go to talk therapy. Well, what if your traumas are from past lives? What if your traumas are from your ancestors? What if you can articulate the trauma? Talk therapy is not going to work for you. There are so many other modes of healing. So we have to be intentional about the mode and the method and how we get it to people, right? So justice means making sure that folks have access to healing and not just telling people, again, if you've been depressed and somebody's asking you to get up out of your bed and go talk to a stranger about all your problems, it's hard to just get up. It's hard to sit up, let alone go pour your guts out to a stranger. So we have to reimagine how we heal, and we have to also heal in community. It can't be an isolated event. So that's what healing justice is about, reframing how we heal and how we bring healing to folks.
I love that. I really love that emphasis on community and healing as well. Thank you so much for sharing that. Ding Zhou, your leadership spanned decades in higher education. What innovative approaches do you believe the next generation of leaders should adopt?
Think about that question, and I thought, a lot of times people say, oh, you're still around. Yeah, I'm still around because I still feel change is still needed in higher education. This institution requires, sometimes I feel like a complete overhaul, because there's certain elements of the higher ed DNA, or how it started, and we're still visible today. And so we do need leaders to really continuously make that change, continuously, as Amber said, help people heal from the hurt that the institution has inflicted on them. So I say this a lot, that leadership is both a science and the art. To me, the science part is really the evidence framework that it's timeless principles about leading human beings that will not change. The research tells us that this works. So there's a set of principles leaders need to follow that really grounds us. The science that give us these timeless principles that we don't have to invent. A lot of books and wisdom from the ancient wisdom about leading people, not just in recent books or in published journals, but there are ancient cultures like mine, many other ancient cultures in the world that have given us these principles about leadership already. We don't need to invent new ones. But the art part of it, that's a creativity that helps us thrive. In the art part of the leadership really allowed us to lead with authenticity, to lead with the contextual of today's society. Yesterday's leader and today's leader, last year's leader and this year's leader have different context. And how must we change and be creative to do that? We lead with our own style. Our own style is that art, right? So we follow the same principles, but we do a little bit differently. I do it in a Dingzhou way, and you do it in the Janelle way, and Amber does it in the Amber way. So I use both creative arts and technology as tools for transformation. I feel that this is from my own experience. The arts evoke empathy, reflection, and a connection. It's a universal language, and it's really is an essential elements to humanizing leadership. And technology, on the other hand, it offers us that structure and scaling and also speed, right? So technology and creative arts are dual engines to me for innovation. So in today's world, we think that they both create an approach. You asked me about what leadership approaches. I believe that the combination of the soul and the heart, the arts and the technology, the combination, the integration of the two it could be a deeply personal, yet a very powerful and very far-reaching. Innovation is just not what we use or what we think of. So it is how we express our values through these tools. Technology is absolutely, to me, is beautiful. I don't know all of it. I'm still learning because I always say I come from the last century. I'm trying to still live in this century. So technology is beautiful, and it is a consistent tool. It scales the impact, and it organizes the complexity that we're not able to do. And it does connect global communities. And the arts, I said, they humanize leadership. So, a poem, I use a lot, different forms of art. I think a poem can dismantle barriers. You see a mural, right? That mural could actually ignite a collective power in the public space. In the picture, of course, we have heard this, picture speaks 1,000 words. So at the Leadership Institute for Tomorrow that I direct, we blend both the arts and the technology. Why is that? Because art speaks to the soul and the text speaks to the mind. And together they move individuals and galvanize institutions. And I think that higher education institution has been too sterile, in my opinion. It doesn't have that humanistic side of it. I think of higher education as very rigid. There's no soft part to it. And that's why I really feel that another soft approach, that bringing things that could touch the souls, not only those of us who work in it, but certainly those who come to learn in the same space. So I'll stop there.
That's wonderful. Thank you so much for that. This next question will be for everybody once again, and it'll be on the topic of empowering the next generation of Sheroes. For those aspiring to become leaders in DEIB, what advice would you offer? How can emerging leaders best position themselves to drive impactful change in their workplaces and communities? And Dingzhou, I would love to start with you once again.
Probably going to sound like a broken record by now. First of all, DEIB, it's not a label that can be banned or outlawed. It is a life to be lived, experienced, and felt. In Chinese, there's a saying meant usually for parents and teachers. It says, 言教不如身教, which means you teach through your action, not your words. So if we want to make lasting impact that make a stick, brain science already show that others are more likely to follow and mimic our behavior when we demonstrate it rather than talking about it. Talking about it is only swimming at the surface. So I say all that to say that, lead with your own life with clarity first by fact-checking our own DEBI index in our life. This is a self-reflection part, and build our leadership from the inside out with a purpose that have those values, not the labels on our forehead or out of our mouth, but live those values in the vision. You can't transform a system if you're not rooted in your own wholeness. So lead inward first. And that's Buddha, right? Cultivation of the self. And Confucius said that too. So you start with yourself, then your family, then your nation, then you can talk about the world peace. So build coalition, and DEIB is a team sport. I'm not a sports person, but if I could use that analogy, so we should use data as our playbook, and stories, as we heard that earlier, stories as our game plan. While we're talking about sports, I want to use another analogy, and that is the impact. We talk about impact. To me, the impact is like running the marathon. It's long-term. Again, I come from a culture of thousands of years. We don't think of things as instant, and we think of things that it will last thousands of years. What is that impact? And so while we celebrate small wins along the way, but along the way, we will have obstacles. We're having missile dropped on us right now on our DEIB culture on a daily basis. So we never know where it's going to drop tomorrow. So we prepare for those, right? My parents came from the war zone era, and they often talk about how they escaped the bombs and how they have survived. The key is, my mentor, Ned Daphne, says, Dingzhou, you need to survive. Survive it, we shall, so that we will pave the path that will lead to lasting change. We have to have faith. We have to have endurance.
I really appreciate that. That resonates very deeply. Amber, I'd love to know your thoughts next.
Buckle up. I think this work is not safe. It has never been safe. It will never be safe. And so one thing that we cannot afford to do is coddle each other, because we have work to do. So buckle up. Know that it's not, if you are given the gift of this fight, and you decide to take it on, buckle up. Number 2 is know your people, have your friends. There are certain things that I cannot say because of my identities. There are things that Dingzhou cannot say because of her identities, and same for Che. So I got people
Recording stopped.
I got people in my back pocket who I know can say the things, right? Within context, within a system of hierarchy and power. So know who your people are and rely on them. Like we said, this is a relay, it's a team sport. You cannot do this by yourself. And number 3, what they say on the airplane, put your mask on first. You got to take care of you. This work is hard. It's a lot. You have to put your mask on first and take care of you. One way to do that is break the work down. If you see the entire hill of racism, sexism, whatever, transphobia, you see the whole hill, it feels insurmountable. But you can start by picking up a handful of sand. You can start by picking up a handful of dirt. So break down the mountains into small, sizable pieces that you can manage, and focus on one piece at a time, and stay in your lane. Whatever your gift is, you do it. If you try to do what other people are doing, or succumb to the pressure that you have to do it a certain way, no. Show up how you need to show up and do what you are good at. When you walk in your gifts, everything is easier. But you trying to prove to other people that you're the baddest activist in the land and that you can do it all, no, you can't. Stop. No, you can't, right? So that's my advice. Know your people, stay in your lane, take care of yourself. And I forgot the first one, but I hope you remembered. Go
I
ahead.
believe it was, if you're given the gift of this fight, buckle up.
Oh, buckle up. That's it. That's right. There it is in the chat. Buckle up. Yes.
I was taking notes because I was like, yep, that's hitting. Che, I would love to know your thoughts next.
Yes, Amber. Boom. I understand that. It's hard to follow the two of you. But yes, the if it's DEIB work, I say as a woman in anything, just a quick piece on what Amber said, you are I always have known I'm on an island by myself, meaning what I say and what I do is not going to be loved and received by everybody, including my supervisor or manager or whoever, who also is very much about this work, because how we all approach it is so different from how everybody else approaches it, which is why we're amazing. And so I know I'm on an island. And so, and I know I may be on the island, and I let people know it's okay to leave me on the island. And this is why your community support is so important. So I would just summarize essentially what I think everyone also is saying is, I learned this from Maya Angelou, who shared this with Oprah Winfrey. Your legacy is in the lives you touch. So as long as you move in your integrity, in your space, in your authenticity, your vulnerability, and your gifts, as Amber just said, that will spread and go very, very far. But it also leaves an imprint on the people you interact and engage with and whichever, and then they take your gift, they absorb some of the gift of you that is wonderful, and then they spread that to other people, right? And that is how the world is immaculately changed. All of us has a person or people who we have adopted little pieces of them in us to make us our whole person, right? And you treat those people and you treat everyone as a gift. They are a treasured thing, no matter how frustrating, no matter their delivery, no matter what it is, because people love to yell at us. It is, you treat them as a gift and you hear what's not being said, right? And this is where healing justice comes in, is extremely critical and important, because to hear that, you have to have done your own self-work, right? To be able to hear the message under the delivery and which not. And so that's just really, really important for folks.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm trying to take notes on what everyone's sharing too, because this is all very much resonating for me personally too. I'm sure for everyone here as well joining us. In the interest of time, I am going to say we have 5 more minutes for this next question, and then we'll move to Q&A. If this is for everybody, if you could implement one bold change tomorrow that would advance equity and inclusion in leadership, what would it be and why? And Che, I'll start with you again.
I'll be quick. Money. Give us unlimited dollars. No, multi-million-dollar budgets. No. And I say money because we always are working on bare bones in this work. And so, but with money and things, actually what's funny is people come to us for all the things no one else wants to pay for. And other people are afraid to pay for. So actually there's a lot of like little mini things we can test and we can pilot and we could try if people could just come to us and we could say yes. And so that piece, it would allow me to be able to just say yes, try it, do it, no thoughts, with no strings attached. That would be wonderful.
Absolutely. Ding Joe, I'd love to know what you think next.
Well, I like to have money too. We're seeing how money it's being played out right now, right? But I think long term, I believe that physical things do not solve our problem. I believe that we need to have spiritual solutions. And so I like to mandate and require unity fluency. If I can mandate that, that is require everyone at every level, especially leadership levels, to learn the process and skills of building unity. If we could make that a curriculum from early on, elementary school, skills building on unity. I require every decision maker to undergo immersive training on how to build unity. And build unity, you know, it's easy to build unity when we're all the same, right? But to build unity in diversity, which is a new phenomenon really at the global level, there's still many countries that don't have the diversity. We are human beings, humankind, work in progress. So why unity? So I think when we learn how to build unity, we have to learn how to build trust. It's a process, right? To get to unity, you have to build trust. You have to make inclusive decisions that encompass what I call the 360 consultation process. To build unity, we also need to enhance collaborations and and work through diverse positionalities and use them as collective strength. So to me, this unity fluency helps navigate conflicts and create a sense of belongings that I know that I've experienced on a smaller scale. So therefore, I really want this on a worldwide level. I think when people need to experience, but they don't know how to, and they have this fear. So create that and align if we have unity, we could align teams and organizations toward common goals. If you look at sports, right? I said I'm not a sport person, but the common goal there for a sport team, they could galvanize that and have a game plan to go. So ultimately lead to more cohesive and effective organization. So that's what I would mandate.
I love it. And Amber, last but not least.
Yep. Okay. So 3 things super fast. One, after white supremacist, capitalist, ableist patriarchy, like get rid of that, we'll probably be fine. The other thing is semantics. We argue about how to do this work and talk about this work oftentimes more than we do the work, right? We are tearing each other down. You didn't show up correctly, or you use this word, or you put an ED on the end of this word, and that's no longer acceptable. We have to have more grace and compassion with each other and stop arguing about stupid stuff, right? Just stop. And then the third thing is we need our Constitution to be upheld. Full stop. I don't think I need to say anything more about that.
100% I agree. Well, thank you so much to each of our esteemed panelists for joining us today and sharing these really critical insights with everyone who's joined us. I would love to open the floor for some Q&A. I know I saw some questions in the chat, so let me see if I can find them really quickly. Otherwise, feel free to come off mute.
Janelle, so we have a question earlier raised by Ingrid Hunt. So does Ingrid like to address your question? You can unmute or we can read your question, either way.
I think many of you have addressed it. Just wondered how you're navigating the pushback from the administration around DEI and the threats and the threatening nature in which it's being presented, and how this is directly impacting your initiatives and programs.
Shay, I can go first. I mean, one, campus, following campus protocol, blah, 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 blah. Personally, I would just say slow down. That question has been raised a lot, and everybody's like, let's jump to action, let's jump to action, let's jump to action. One of the biggest pieces of racism, white supremacy culture is a sense of urgency. And that is to keep your head on a swivel. One of the objects is to keep you so busy you can't focus on the actual work or actually processing and which not. I am a fan of the Trisha Herseys of the world who believe rest is resistance. So my advice is slow down. And when I say slow down, I'll just say I had wrote some questions down in answer to that. A friend of mine said, take your cape off so someone else can put theirs on. So Amber's reference to the relay, there are other people willing to do pieces and parts that you don't have to jump into and do right now. So for me, I'm waiting and seeing what is, for example, our National Association for Diversity Officers in Higher Education was the lead plaintiff on a lawsuit against President Trump, which did some DEI thing that got this preliminary injunction started, right? So I can support that organization and they can do that piece of work so I don't have to think about it, right? But also, what if I let it all fall apart? What if I let me fall apart? What if I opt not to respond right now? All of those are things to kind of think about in response, because again, if you're constantly trying to jump and solve and solve and solve, burnout and exhaustion is real. And I go back, I think Amber mentioned COVID in the very, very beginning. That was a period for us to examine what rest and stopping and pausing really look like. And I think it's time that we revisit that practice.
I'm going to bring my culture into this once again, because that's just who I am and how I've been taught. In Chinese culture that has been ruled by emperors for thousands of years, right? Whatever emperor says, next day it shall be. So, but because of that kind of system, it developed the saying that you have policy, I have strategy. So whatever the emperor's handed down, the people are saying, we have strategy. There are always ways to approach it. And a lot of times setbacks, which is what we feel for a lot of people who said, we made progress, this is setback, or this is being, we're going to get buried. I think that it's just a different way of framing where we are. A lot of times setback is to, you go backwards to gain more momentum, to you gain more time that you understand the last play. I said that last play did not get the yardage we needed. What is the next play we need to strategize? That's the strategy. And we can absolutely do this work without giving up what we believe in, but we have to be smart about it. And I said that earlier too. If we die, then we have no battles, but we need to learn to survive. I think someone said that earlier, and maybe Che, you were saying that, to survive so that we can conquer it all. And it is not our generation that we will see the fruit of our labor. It is future generation. And so we're not going to seek for immediate. So I guess it's reframing and readjusting, recharging and rebooting, reprogramming this whole gameplay.
Thank you so much. I know that we are at time, and understandably folks will probably have to drop, but for those of us who would like to continue, Jolie, were there any other questions in the chat that you saw?
Sorry. No, that's it. That's the question. A lot of folks now are saying thank you for the wonderful, inspiring insights and things where we need to do. Buckle up and also fast self-check and also doing the assets equity, research.
Definitely. For everyone who's still here, I wanted to say thank you so much, and let's all give a warm thank you to each of our fabulous panelists for joining us today. Thank you again for your insights and your courage and being vulnerable with each of us here today. I also wanted to say thank you again for everybody joining us and for supporting yourselves, not just in your own professional development, but in building a world where more unity and equity is accessible to all. Thank you again. And if you have any questions about future events or getting onto the newsletter, feel free to email us at, I put it in the chat, it's the CWN departmental email, and I've already lost where it is, but CalWomen, CalWomxn at berkeley.edu. We hope to see you at future events. Thank you again.